Hello and welcome to ThePrint. Today we have with us a very eminent guest, one of India's top nuclear scientists and former chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, Mr. Anil Kakodkar. Mr. Kakodkar, who was also the former director of Baba Atomic Research Center, will talk to us about India's nuclear energy program, how we need to ramp up our domestic nuclear capabilities, and the recent breakthrough by a US firm developing thorium based nuclear fuel, among others. Welcome to ThePrint, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me start, sir, without wasting any more time. So, I wanted to ask you about this recent breakthrough made by the US firm Clean Core Thorium Energy, which has developed ANEEL or Advanced Nuclear Energy for Enriched Life Fuel, the first of its kind thorium based nuclear fuel. What is this breakthrough that the firm has achieved and why is it so important?
Yeah, it's important because, for nuclear energy, you require fissile I, materials which can fission and release fission energy.
Hmm.
In nature, uranium 235, one of the isotopes of uranium, is the only material which can fission. However, the remaining part of uranium, the other isotope of uranium, uranium 238,
Hmm.
that can be converted to fissile material while it is in the reactor.
Hmm.
And on a similar logic, thorium, which also occurs in nature, can also be converted to fissile material. It gets converted to uranium 233, which is fissile. Now, so far, nuclear energy generation is based on use of the material that you get from the earth and then play with little adjustment of the composition of uranium 235. You can use it as natural, which is 7 parts of uranium 235 in 1000 parts of total uranium.
Hmm.
But you can also enrich it to maybe 3%, 5%,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
use it in what is known as light water reactors.
Hmm.
But uh, the point is, this uranium is used only in once through mode, in the sense you make an appropriate fuel for use in the reactor, get energy out of that fuel while it is in the reactor.
Hmm.
When you have extracted the energy that is possible to be extracted in that cycle,
Hmm.
you take the fuel out and in once through mode, which is the most of the world uses uranium in once through mode. This the spent fuel, the used fuel, then is declared as waste. Now that allows a very small part of uranium to be used for energy production.
Hmm.
Whereas, of course, in India we also adopt closed fuel cycle. Also in some other few other countries like France, Russia. Now there, the spent fuel, we don't treat that as waste. We treat that as a resource because, as I said, the uranium 238
Hmm.
gets converted to plutonium 239, which is also a fissile material.
Right.
So you can recycle this fuel and get more energy.
Hmm. Hmm.
Likewise, if you are using thorium in the reactor, then the irradiated thorium you can reprocess and recycle
Hmm.
along with the uranium 233 produced in the reactor, and you get more energy. So the point is that uh, the world has been by and large using uranium in once through mode, and primarily it was driven by the fear of diversion of fissile material for weapons purposes. So
Hmm.
uh, United States at one point of time, during the time of President Jimmy Carter, they decided a policy of only once through use, and they abandoned reprocessing for civil nuclear production, and also kind of influenced most of the world to do that.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
is actually an unsustainable way of uranium use or
Hmm.
nuclear material use,
Hmm.
which was okay till now, because anyway deployment of nuclear energy was restricted to the it was restricted to the advanced countries of the world,
Hmm.
and its share in the total energy production in the world was not very large. Use of nuclear energy was primarily limited to the advanced or developed countries.
Hmm.
uh, Use of uranium in once through mode, and then the spent fuel being declared as waste, uh, was kind of, I won't say it was all right, but in the sense it did not hinder the energy demand that
Hmm.
was there of nuclear energy. Now we have this situation of, there is a climate change threat, and then there is a global consensus that we should get into clean energy transition, make sure that there is no carbon dioxide emission. And that means that the nuclear has to play a much larger role in terms of meeting global energy requirement.
Currently, sir, globally, the nuclear energy generators generated is around 350 gigawatt.
Yeah, that's right. And which may constitute around 10% of the total energy, total electricity that the world produces.
Okay.
So, but now that we have to move towards clean energy transition and meet the global requirements through clean energy,
Hmm.
nuclear is, in fact, I would say the largest provider of clean energy.
Hmm.
And so there'll be much larger demand of nuclear energy. And then this once through use, that mode is unsustainable. And so it will be important that we recycle the nuclear fuel. And while we have to recycle uranium, one could also recycle thorium, then, as I said earlier,
Hmm.
because thorium also on irradiation in the reactor becomes fissile, uranium 233. And if you do that, then the energy potential of nuclear fuel, both uranium and thorium, becomes very large.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
this development of anil fuel, which is taking place by CCTE, the Clean Core Thorium Energy, at Idaho National Laboratory, is important in the context of leveraging thorium for meeting global energy requirement.
Hmm.
And this, of course, is of great interest to India, because India, we don't have quantities of uranium which can be considered commercially viable. We
But so
have
we have
we have
world's largest reserve of thorium.
That's right, and we have uranium, but the uranium grade is very low, so the cost of uranium would be higher. But thorium, as you correctly observed, we have the largest reserves of thorium,
Hmm.
and that's why this development is of importance to India.
So, what does it mean for India, and what kind of opportunities can it bring for India?
Well, the important point is, in India, we are practicing the heavy water reactors, pressurized heavy water reactors. These reactors, of course, currently they run on natural uranium, but these reactors have a lot of flexibility in terms of fuel use.
Hmm.
It can use uranium, it can use enriched uranium, it can use thorium with enriched uranium, it can use thorium with uranium 233. And in fact, you get many more advantages when thorium is used in these reactors. So, and as you might have heard about the three-stage nuclear power program that uh, is the kind of main focus of India's development, nuclear
Yeah, I'll
power
I'll
development.
ask you a question about that as well.
Yeah, correct. So right from the beginning of our program, three-stage nuclear development, which is aimed at arriving at utilization of thorium on a large scale, is
Hmm.
important. And this fuel, of course, is actually well suited for use in heavy water reactors and allowing us there is derive advantage of thorium in heavy water reactors. As I said, there are advantages and we can talk about it. But the spent fuel which will come out after irradiating this anil fuel will contain uranium 233 and remaining residual thorium. And of course, there will be some residual uranium from the HALEU component,
Hmm.
but plutonium will be very little. It will be burnt, burning of plutonium will take place. So one can recycle this material in right proportion of uranium 233 and thorium and then run what are known as molten salt reactors, which is actually a very promising candidate for the third stage of nuclear power program in India, the thorium stage. So you can have thorium-based molten salt reactor, and you can enter into that third phase after use of this fuel in heavy water reactors, which we are operating currently, or we have this 100 gigawatt program. So these heavy water reactor will produce enough fuel for triggering the third stage of India's nuclear power program.
Okay. So, if you can tell our viewers what exactly is this anil fuel that we are talking about? What does it comprise?
Yes, so see, normally, as I said, in heavy water reactors, we use natural uranium, which, as I said, contains 7 parts of uranium 235 and remaining 993 parts of uranium 238. Now, in anil fuel, you use a composite of HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium. Now, HALEU is in contrast to natural uranium, which I said is 7 parts in 1,000 parts of uranium. The you, for example, that is used in heavy water reactors, natural uranium used in heavy water reactors. In PWRs or BWRs, the light water reactors, you enrich uranium to something like 3% or 5%, depending on the design. In HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium, you enrich uranium up to 15 to 20%.
Hmm.
Now, 20% is the limit for civilian uranium use, because beyond that, then there is concern that it might be diverted to weapons uranium, which requires a very highly enriched uranium.
Hmm.
Now, so you take some part of this HALEU uranium, HALEU fuel, mix it with thorium. So a large part is thorium and maybe 4 parts, 4:1, 4 parts of thorium, 1 part of HALEU, something of that kind. And if you have a fuel like this, then in a heavy water reactor, you can use it in a heavy water reactor as it is now. The reactor doesn't require any change, but it can give very high burn up in compared to 7 gigawatt days per ton burn up with natural uranium. Such a fuel will give you maybe 50 to 60 gigawatt days per ton.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that gives, of course, on the safety count, you get advantages. There is saving of natural uranium in in use of fuel in this way. But the quantity of spent fuel to be handled comes down by a very large magnitude, factor of 7 or 8. And so, in India, for example, we use reprocessing. So, you have to reprocess much smaller quantities of heavy metal. In some other countries where this might be used, and if they are kind of not uh, kind of favorably inclined towards reprocessing and recycle, but still they have to store it, and they have to store much smaller quantities of such a fuel. So there is cost saving there. So
Mhm.
either way, it's an advantageous situation. And as I said earlier, from Indian standpoint, uh, the advantage is we are able to move to thorium much faster.
Okay, so you have been one of the early proponents of harnessing thorium for a long term energy security. Also, considering that India has one of the world's largest thorium reserves, have you been able to harness thorium adequately?
Well,
Has, has India been able to use?
not to the level one would have liked, but to some extent we have done. For example, we have irradiated thorium in reactors and made small reactors out of uranium 233. There is a reactor Kamini operating at Kalpakam, I think for more than 30 years now.
Okay.
But it's a small reactor, 30 kilowatt system. Similarly, in our power reactors, the in the initial stages when you start up the reactor, uh, if you use the normal fuel which you are going to use in the reactor, and they are all fresh. When you start a new reactor, the fuel is fresh, so there is too much of reactivity, and also the power profile within the core is such that you get more power in the central region and lesser power in the outer region. And so it becomes very difficult to operate the reactor at near full power as soon as you start a new reactor. Now, to overcome this problem, you need to put some absorbers so that you suppress the region where the power generation levels are very high, so that you create a kind of uniformity. And once that happens, then you can generate near full power right from day one.
Hmm, hmm,
Now, these absorbers, earlier we used to use depleted uranium so that you can get full power right from the beginning of reactor commissioning. But then, recognizing that our interest is in thorium, we did design power flattening in fresh cores using thorium. And today, we always use thorium for power flattening. We have also reprocessed such fuel bundles. So we have some experience. We also had designed an advanced heavy water reactor, a 300 megawatt boiling water reactor, which was a heavy water moderated reactor. And this design actually was designed in response to the situation that arose after Chernobyl. So the
hmm,
idea was to have a reactor which will be super safe and will not cause any impact, any adverse impact in public domain, regardless of any situation that may happen in the reactor. That reactor, in fact, a lot of experimental work was done. The reactor, the fully developed system. I had hoped that see at that time we had challenge of because getting so much of enriched uranium was an issue, and
hmm.
also getting plutonium, which is another way where you could start such a reactor. But we had to prepare fuel for the prototype fast breeder reactor. That was a higher priority.
Hmm.
So that reactor could not be, construction could not be taken up at that time, and I had hoped that somewhere later it would get taken up, but unfortunately it is It has remained in the back burner all along. But we have a lot of experience. The point is, it's not as if nothing has been done on thorium. A lot of work has been done on thorium, and I think this anil fuel development does open up an opportunity to leapfrog and compensate for at least some of the lost time.
Right, right. So even if we are yet to harness the full potential of the thorium reserve that we have, China is planning to start building a thorium-based molten salt reactor in Gobi Desert. How do you see it? As in, they're already, announced
Yeah.
developing this thorium-based molten salt reactor.
No, that is an important development because, see, as I was saying earlier, you realize the full potential of nuclear material only after if you recycle.
Hmm.
And then there are perceived proliferation risks if you recycle uranium fuel, and that's why it is not being recycled in many of the countries. But with thorium, I think we can reprocess and recycle on a large scale with much lesser proliferation risk. So, from the point of view of global energy supply, I
Hmm.
think thorium is an extremely important fuel now that nuclear energy is required to play much larger role. And I think molten salt reactors are, again, just like I told you about advanced heavy water reactor, a safe reactor which will not have any impact in public domain.
Hmm.
The molten salt reactor also, the fuel is already molten, so there is no question of core melt there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it is one of the very safe reactors. And so thorium fuel recycle and use in molten salt reactor is actually the thing of future. And Chinese obviously have taken the lead. I think we should also, as I was saying earlier, we should also move to molten salt reactor running on thorium and catch up as soon as possible.
So, is it true that this US firm, Clean Core Thorium Energy, they have received an export license for the fuel from US government?
Yes, they very recently. I think it's what I heard was only a day or two back ago. That license has come very recently,
Hmm.
and this was actually uh, the if we have to kind of take advantage of this development in US, obviously we'll have to go through this collaborative framework between the US entity and the Indian entities, and that requires US government's approval. So that is what is called that 810 approval,
Hmm.
and for that an application was must have been filed by CCTE,
Hmm.
and there must have been a kind of promise from the Indian side or interest from Indian side, and on the basis of which I think so that clears the road for uh, kind of developing collaboration for further steps. Further steps will be actually you have to carry out a demonstration in an actual operating PHWR, because see what has been done is
Here
to
in India, here in India, sir.
here in India, because if we were to use in India, we would like to test it out and then on our own reactor.
Hmm.
And this development at Idaho National Lab, it is irradiation in ATR, Advanced Test Reactor, and
Hmm.
that's a pin level irradiation. Now,
Okay.
uh, for us, for use in PHWR, we have to carry out irradiation at the bundle level, so
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
we are assured of the integrity of the whole bundle.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's important that one carries out irradiation test of this fuel in an Indian Indian reactor. And for that, there is some joint work is necessary, and this 810 clearance does facilitate that joint work.
Okay, so once this approval comes through, then that paves the way for the anil fuel to be tested in the pressurized heavy water reactors here in India.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So India has also committed to achieve, net zero in terms of greenhouse gas emissions by 2017. But the rate at which we are going, do you think that we can achieve net zero by 2070? I mean, where does India stand, if I were to ask you, as far as our nuclear energy program is concerned?
Well, now that government has announced this nuclear mission
Hmm.
of 100 gigawatt by 2047,
Understood.
uh, uh, things are appearing little better. In fact, I was quite concerned as to how one would reach net zero without nuclear, because a developed India, we also want to be Viksit Bharat by 2047, and that requires energy which is much larger than the current energy use, because the quality of life or human development index can is been correlated directly with the energy per capita energy consumption,
Hmm. Hmm.
and we will need to first of all uh, the it's not just electricity, total energy use, energy that is used for transportation, energy that is used in industry,
Hmm.
all of that has to be clean energy, not
Hmm.
just electricity. And so today electricity forms maybe 20% or little less of the total energy that we use.
Hmm.
And also for being Viksit Bharat, the total energy that we use has to go up by around 4 times.
Hmm.
So now all that energy, that is elect electricity occupying a major share of the total electricity use, and this entire energy in the in the system that we use in India coming
Hmm.
from clean energy sources,
Hmm.
actually it means a very large demand on nuclear energy. And in fact, on that scale, if you see, even 100 gigawatt would appear small.
Hmm.
We
And
probably will.
right now, sir, a nuclear share is a drop in the ocean, just 1.6% of the total energy mix.
Yeah, you are right. So when nuclear was not a part of discourse, I was quite worried as to how will ever become Viksit Bharat uh, with zero emission.
Hmm.
Uh, Now that we have this nuclear emission, we're on the right track. And there is, of course, as you said, this challenge: how will we reach 100 gigawatt by 2047 when today we are out only at around 8 gigawatts? And then the other important thing is from uh, 2047 to 2070, we have to bridge that gap between wherever we reach at 2047 in terms of nuclear and the total nuclear energy that would be required for Viksit Bharat. So it's an uphill task, and of course, if we don't we are not able to realize this task, then it would mean two things: either we will have to make our energy requirements from whatever source we get, notwithstanding its carbon footprint, or secondly, we will remain, that Viksit Bharat dream will be that much distant if we are not able to reach sufficient energy. So I think it's a very important and a very major challenge, and we must figure out ways of not only moving on the right path, but also move on that right path in a very speedy manner. Rapid
Uh,
deployment is also an important point.
but sir, why haven't we been able to ramp up our nuclear energy generation? The Indo-US civil nuclear deal was signed way back in 2008, but we have not been able to make much headway when it comes to ramping up our nuclear energy generation.
Well, we have made some headway. In the sense, it is still in that, as I said, drop in the ocean level, but some headway has been made. For example, um, uh, before the civil nuclear cooperation got opened up,
Hmm.
we were actually running short of uranium, and the capacity factor of our reactors, which was actually low, much lower than 8 gigawatt of today. So that itself, there is a challenge as to how to run them at full capacity. Now that we are able to access uranium from global market, the
Hmm.
capacity factor has been restored to near full 90% or so, 85, 90%. And the capacity also has grown. And today, as a result of that, we have come up to 8 gigawatts. Uh, so something we are kind of getting completely throttled. Compared to that, we are making progress.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I would say that's significant. But the idea was at that time, you know, we can't do everything by having only one agency to deploy. Nuclear Power Corporation is doing all this work.
Hmm.
And even at that time, we had signed MOUs between NPC and NTPC, NPC and Indian Oil, NPC and I think Nalco Aluminium Company. Now, unfortunately, those MOUs remain dormant again. Nothing much happened. I am happy that now the MOU with NTPC has been reactivated and NTPC is now well on its way to start setting up nuclear reactor. Now that has to, we should have more players brought in to set up nuclear power plants, and NTPC should, quite apart from its own role in adding capacity fast, it should also play a role of mentor in terms of capacity building of other companies to get into nuclear power development. That is the only way we will be able to go to such levels.
But do you think, sir, that the absence of private investments, private players, has impeded India's growth as a civilian nuclear power? The government is currently
Yeah,
working to amend the Atomic
yeah,
Energy Act 1963 and the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damages Act 2010. So, do you think that, once that is done, it will
yeah,
pave the way for more private sector participation?
yeah. See, eventually one will have to necessarily bring in private sector, and I have been saying this for a long time. But it will be wrong to say that today it has not, that is, today's growth is limited by non participation of private sector. Because I think, see, the important role thing that private sector can bring in is the finance. To to expand nuclear power program, you have to invest lot of money. Now, at this moment, the public sector companies in PCIL, but also other companies, they are reasonably well endowed in terms of their internal resources, and they can add lot of capacity. So, but you are right. At, this is, we're talking about 8 going to 20, 30, 40. Uh, all this can happen without private sector. But going to 100 gigawatts and beyond, we certainly need much more finance. And that is where we need to bring in private sector. And so for that, I think I hear that there is work going on in terms of making adjustments in the legislative provisions, both for participation of private sector as well as addressing the liability issues. So that's a welcome sign. But see, the private sector bringing in money is one part. Maybe private sector can bring in a more efficient management, but private sector will have to also learn nuclear. There has to be a corporate learning. A nuclear reactor, you cannot say that, well, now it is not making profit for me, so I want to shut down and go home. If you have started a reactor, you cannot switch off and go home.
Hmm,
Even
hmm,
if it is not producing electricity, you have to keep its system running, pumps running. The decay heat has to be continuously removed. So, as an operational entity, they have to keep performing, whether it is producing electricity or not, whether it is producing profit or not. And
hmm,
of course, when it works well, as our PSWRs are working, they are very, very profitable. It's a very attractive business,
hmm,
but that requires that learning at the professional level, and professionals you can hire, you can train.
hmm,
But I
hmm,
think there is also a learning at the corporate level, the kind of nuclear safety culture. As I said, you can't get into just acquisition and mergers just purely on financial considerations.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
You have to worry about safety. The regulatory board, the safety regulator, they will have to also look at who is operating, what are their credentials, whether if they want to change hands, should that be allowed or not. All these are important things which is not there in other non-nuclear sector.
Hmm, hmm,
So what I'm trying to say is there is that learning experience, and I would have hoped that while the window was open for private sector to come in minority role, and I had been advocating that, you join as minority role, learn the ropes. A time will come when you will get into majority role. Again, that has not happened. But I think over a period of time, I'm sure the legislative corrections will take place. But I'm certain private sector will have to go through a learning experience before they can run nuclear business on their own.
hmm. Right, right. Because I mean, safety concerns are there, and that will have to
Correct.
be a.
No, safety concerns are there. There are also issues about material control,
Hmm.
because you get fuel from outside, and both whether it's a fuel acquired from outside or domestic, it can't go into the wrong hands,
Right, right.
because there is some serious safety issue. So the government has to still play a role.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
and then particularly when you're talking about recycle, this becomes even more important. So these are all complex issues. It's not as if you change an act and private sector will start uh, getting activated.
I mean, there still needs to be a lot of government supervision, lot of government oversight.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So India is also pushing for research and development of small modular reactors, what we call the Bharat small reactors, to
Yeah.
augment indigenous capacity and making ourselves self-reliant. So how do you see that?
Well, I think see, small modular reactor, as I understand, there is a background to that, and that background is, the European Union, uh, they have got into a framework now where which is called carbon border adjustment mechanism. So, for example, if India is exporting steel to European Union, then unless the carbon footprint of that material is below a certain acceptable threshold, it will attract an additional tax, and it's a significant tax. So, which would mean that unless the carbon footprint of the materials that we produce is brought below a threshold, and for example, unless we move towards green material, of our materials to other countries like European Union would become very challenging. And industry obviously has said, and that's a thing which is already kicked in, I think, 2026. it will start showing the effect. So industry has kind of is quite conscious about this, and so there has been discussion between the industry and the Department of Atomic Energy and Nuclear Power Corporation, saying that, well, what can we do within the current legislative framework? Current legislative framework requires the operator, a utility, to be a government company. So they said, okay, we fund a captive power plant for meeting our own requirements, the industry says. We will construct this as per your design, as per your guidance, and construct the reactor very fast with due approval of AERB and all. And then we'll be guided by you, and then getting regulatory approvals through you, and then turn over this reactor back to you for operation because you are a government company. But the entire electricity you give us for our use as clean energy supply for our production. So that's the concept behind Bharat Small Reactor, which I think is a good idea. And some discussions I think are all going on there. So, so what is the reactor to be used for this purpose? And we have a 220 megawatt PHWR. Mind you, the world is making a lot of noise about small, medium reactor. That small means up to 300 megawatts. And India has been practicing 220 megawatts for so many decades. And these reactors have shown their operational and economic performance to global standards. Highly economic, competitive electricity production, very safe. So the question was, why run behind other development which are yet to take place? It will take some time. Instead of that, make use of our own reactors, make some minor improvements, and meet our clean energy requirements today. And this is something which can be done within the current legislative framework. So that's the concept of Bharat Small Reactor, which I think is a good idea. And I hope the discussions that are going on soon fructify and something emerges. So, you want small, medium reactors, you should have reactors which are essentially passive systems and which have no kind of impact in the public domain. And the molten salt reactor, which I mentioned, is actually one such reactor.
Yeah,
So,
safe
according
reaction.
to safe reactor. So, according to me, this small modular reactor that India should prioritize is a molten salt reactor running on thorium, which is consistent with our fuel endowment, which is consistent with our thorium kind of utilization, and also consistent with the safety. But having said that, I think we necessarily require large reactors to meet our thing. You want 100 gigawatts today, and maybe tomorrow more than 100 gigawatts. Now, if you have 1000 megawatt units, then you still require to build 100 unit reactors to reach 100 gigawatts. So, if you have 700 megawatt as the main unit, so maybe you have to build 140 reactors to reach 100 gigawatts. If you have 100 megawatt uh, SMR, then you have to build maybe 1000 reactors to get 100 gigawatt. Now, constructing 1000 megawatts, finding sites for so many, these are all uphill tasks. So
Yeah.
India's mainstay has to be a necessarily large reactor.
Mm-hmm.
SMR is not going to do large reactor, and large reactor also should be safe. And our reactor, 700 megawatt reactor, is quite safe.
Right.
So that is the first choice. We have some niche area for SMRs. For example, we talked about the captive power, clean power use of industry, or for example, uh, you want to make use of these sites, brownfield sites vacated by retiring coal plants, we can make use of that. So their small reactors can play a role, but they must be meeting the safety criteria which I said. So
Right.
so SMR can never be replacement for large reactors in India, and also SMRs of the kind which have that super safety characteristics. Only those we should think of, and not just PWRs.
Right. So, on the issue of safety, I wanted to ask this question that, post Fukushima, there seems to be a fear psychosis about safety as far as nuclear energy is concerned. There are countries who have, have gone slow on their plans to harness nuclear energy. I wanted to ask you, I mean, are the fears unfounded? How safe are nuclear energy in today's day and time, now that we have advanced technologically? I mean, how safe is nuclear energy?
Well, if you ask me, nuclear energy is the safest of all alternatives available to mankind. For example, I'll give you an explanation. You search internet and ask a question, the fatalities per unit electricity produced, and compare different electricity generating systems, coal, hydro, solar, wind, nuclear, everything. And you will get data, this available data. You can search, you can internet freely you surf, and you will find the fatalities per unit of electricity produced are the least with nuclear. People are, for example, of course, Fukushima was a very bad accident. Chernobyl was a very bad accident. But there has been no casualty in Fukushima because of radiation.
Hmm.
There have been a lot of casualties because of tsunami. Reactor got damaged. But there was very little radiation exposure. Some radiation exposure was there, but I would say, in fact, categorize that to be inconsequential. Because we can measure with that sensitivity, you can say that no, 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 you received some radiation. Whether it will do harm, see, that is because we play very super safe. We have this linear no threshold logic in nuclear. So, which means that radiation at any level will do some harm. So, we try to keep it as low as possible or as low as achievable. Now, this is what creates that trauma in public mind. Everybody wants to say, no, 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 I don't want to see any radiation. And when we sort of evacuate people, displace people during an accident, this fear creates a huge trauma in the minds of people, and that actually leads to other safety issues, the psychosomatic effects of large population displacement. Actually, those have been found to be far, far greater than the issues of radiation effects.
Hmm.
And this has been proven by doctors who have carried out studies after Chernobyl. And in fact, these studies have been carried out two times, once after 10 years of accident and second after 20 years of accident. And they prove that. So you are right. These fears, come to think of it, are actually unfounded. But the question is, we can't wish them away, because if the public has some concern, those concerns have to be addressed.
Hmm.
And so, on one side, we should engage with public, bring to them the right information, convince them about safety. For example, radiation may cause cancer, but if one gets cancer, you go to a hospital and get radiation treatment.
Right. Yeah.
So, people have to be made aware of this safety and So radiation has, there is a concern, but there is also an healing aspect of radiation.
So, with this, I come to the last question of the interview. So, you were closely involved with the Pokhran test. We have come a long way since then. I mean, 27 years. So, how do you see the development since then? As in, how far have we traveled? And if I were to ask you, what would be your, you know, five advice to the government as to how to go about our nuclear energy program in the next 5 years, what would that be?
Well, I will talk only about the civilian part
Yes, of course.
because I think it is not right to publicly talk about strategic advice. Now, as far as the civil energy is concerned, as I said, I think we need to accelerate the ways of deployment of nuclear energy, nuclear capacity. And the way to do that is to bring in more players and do their handholding. They, in terms of project management and all, they have a lot of experience, but in matters nuclear, do a lot of handholding. Secondly, we should very quickly move from uranium to thorium because the uranium supply, while there is plenty of uranium in Earth, the uranium production in the near future, I see a fair mismatch between the supply and demand, and the uranium prices will become very volatile. But apart from the commercial aspects, uranium is a very sensitive matter,
Hmm.
and so accessing uranium will become difficult. So sooner we shift from uranium to thorium, better it is for energy security of the country, and that is, of course, in the right direction as far as the domestic nuclear energy resources are concerned. So otherwise, we are getting into a higher and higher vulnerability domain, which may become very difficult to handle at some stage. And so there is, according to me, great urgency towards moving towards thorium. We have lost a lot of time. We can't afford to lose any more time. Thirdly, I think development has to go on. For example, we talked about thorium molten salt reactor. A lot of development has to be done before we realize that. So we need to accelerate that. Fast reactors, there is a delay. We need to accelerate fast reactor technology. We have to. There are several things to be done there, and there are other areas. High temperature reactors are other areas. So I think our pace of R&D has to go up. It is not at all adequate. So these are the things which, and for that, I think building human resource, grooming young people. Young people are bubbling with energy, bubbling with ideas, and I think it can't be like a hierarchy controlled. I tell you what to do and you do. I think we must have a little open system where a lot of these ideas flourish because R&D is extremely important. So that is what I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Kakodkar, for talking to us. I mean, you gave lot of insights about our, how to go about our civil nuclear program. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.